but then the work has to keep you there.
Right. And so that, so those first photos that got you noticed, so like in the Vortman show, was that the work where you were photographing, collaging, rephotographing?
Yes.
That was that?
Yes.
But by the time you get to the Whitney Biennial, is that the staged photograph, the
Yes.
staged color photographs?
Yes. In between that was instead of collaging on the photograph, I actually started putting giant pieces of paper on objects on location. And that's what I showed at Artist Space. And then the next step was actually building sets in my studio. And that's what was in the Whitney Biennial.
Okay. And
the first Whitney one. The second one actually had a movie.
Nice.
So I thought, okay, I guess this means it's okay to make movies.
Right, right. So I think I've seen some of those where the some of the sets are like they almost look like drawings on paper.
Yeah, my studio was it was an empty space, and it was about 25 feet wide and about 40 feet long, and the wall, there was one wall at the end of it that was again 25 feet wide and about 12 feet tall, and I painted the sets on. I would paint backdrops on that, and then I would build the sets forward from that. So it was basically like it was a theatrical set. Until I got to a series called Real Pictures, which was photographed out on location.
Right. And so what, where were you taking inspiration from at that point? I mean, like were these, when I look at some of those, they look, I mean, are they like one-liners, or are they,
I mean, I used to make, I used to say that I just presented something and I would let the audience complete the story.
Right.
And that's not so true of my work now, but back when it was the narrative work, I did present like one frame, one scene. And actors they were moving, right. They're just not frozen. But let's say the first series like that, or the most recognized, was called Domestic Dramas. So that was easy. We had little bitty kids. And so it was based around that. Now, as far as the sets, they might have been influenced a lot of times by architecture, because I was always kind of interested in that. Also, comics,
right.
Or cartoons, because I mean that's what's on the television when kids are around. And then the next series called Near Modern Disasters, and that came from the period of furniture, clothing, etc. But also during that time there were several wars that were breaking out.
Right.
There were earthquakes. There were what was something else that really? There was a lot of sudden violence happening in our country.
Yeah. So was this like 1980 or what time were we?
No, 85, 86.
So,
There was like car bombings. The first time we started hearing about car bombings in France and I think in London. And so there was all this sort of sudden impact violence, and that's what Near Modern Disasters came from. Now, my take on it was a little more comical, because I remember telling actors, sorry, I keep hitting the mic.
No, that's all right.
Okay. I would tell actors, this is the comics. This is how I want you to act.
Right.
I want overacting. I want over expressions. And so, it went from that. That's how it started. And then it went from, I thought, there was a series I made. And I was always trying to add other elements to my shows, like if it was something to do with motion picture, like the Near Modern Disasters and the Domestic Dramas. I didn't feel my actors had any character development.
Right.
So the next series was called, I didn't actually title the series. I wanted to just make a piece of art and then make another piece of art and then make another one and then show them all together.
Sure.
But I started trying to make these sound effects that I wanted to be playing in the gallery. And I wanted the gallery painted a dark gray, and it was sort of the beginning of these lights that you could focus just on the photographs. Right. The material of the photographs were Cibachrome, which are basically, there was this like silver material behind that paper. So the more light you put on it, the brighter they became.
Right.
So I wanted the galleries dark gray, darkly lit, and then the lights only on the photographs, so they looked like they were basically projected.
Right.
And I wanted some kind of a sound effect. Well, then Susan Freundheim, who was a writer at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and also at the time the girlfriend of Dave Hickey, the critic. Right. I didn't know Dave was also a musician. She goes, Dave really loves your work. You ought to talk to him. He's
an eccentric fellow.
Oh, yeah, he's Dave. He's great. And she goes, Dave really likes your work, and you ought to talk to him about doing music. And I go, really? So Dave and I talked, and I would send him a picture, and he would write a music. And we have a whole soundtrack.
Wow.
And he said, I see this as Life as We Know It. And so it became, the series was titled Life as We Know It. So that show became relatively successful and traveled. And, well, I didn't mean to say that. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the next series. That one was okay.
Right.
But people said, I know what it was. So I thought I wanted to work in black and white.
Right.
So the next series started out by making a set in my studio, and I photographed it. It looked like a Dick Van Dyke show.
Right.
It was like so cheapy looking and funky, being in black and white. So I thought, black and white is reality. It's what we believe. It's in the newspapers before newspapers were color.
Right.
This really dates everything.
Oh, back when there were still newspapers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there was that too. And so I thought, okay, this has to be done out on location. So I had moved into this neighborhood over here that was very suburban, like early like 50s type neighborhood.
Right.
So all the pieces were shot on location, and I titled the series Real Pictures.
Right.
Well, that series is what I meant. Became very successful. It traveled around all over the place, and so people would say, "What are you going to do next?" And I would say, "Well, Love and Lust." And I just made up titles.
I think that series is the one that, when I looked at your body of work, kind of piqued my interest. The most, like when I was just kind of like diving into what all did you do over the years. I think part of it is, by going black and white, and the fact that that there are photography has always been sort of documenting that when you put your characters and those made up narratives out in the real world, and you shoot it in black and white, people start trying to figure out, is this real, or is this
right,
or is this constructed? Like, how, and
that's why it was called Real Pictures, for one.
Right.
But the other interesting thing that happened because of that is during the early part, well, it's still the early part of my career, but the earliest part, several curators presented my work to the Museum of Modern Art for purchase, and it was rejected all the time. It was always rejected. And what their comments were back to my art dealer was, it's too big, it's too colorful, and it's too fabricated. Okay, well, they got it, right?
Right.
So they purchased one of my Real Pictures pieces. And when I met Peter Glassie, the curator, and I told him that story, he goes, yeah, that's true. And I said, yeah, but this is the biggest piece I've made, and it's just as fabricated. It just happens to be black and white. And we had this discussion about that, reality and believability. But it also did something else that I really liked. By being in black and white, people related to what was happening in the content of the piece. Before that, it was like, what did you build? What did you paint? Who are the people in it? The content was not very successful in the early work. People really just, color does different things. And the black and white brought reality to that work.
Right. So when you were talking about the work, or just before that, you were talking about a particular type of paper that was highly reflective and high contrast. I think I had seen that on the materials listed on some of those pieces that oil was listed. Right. Were you like going in with black? Were you adding to the blacks? Or what?
The next series was called Love and Lust, and I wanted to have these sort of, again, it's a long time ago, so I don't remember all the reasons I did things, but I didn't want to do it in color, but I wanted to create a mood somehow of each piece.
Okay.
And I didn't know how, there was a thing then called photo oils, and I think they still have them. Okay. And that's how hand-colored photographs used to be made.
Okay.
They're actually made to be put on photographs. They're semi-transparent.
Got it.
So before color, if somebody wanted color, they would use these photo oils. So my first example was there was a piece I made where it looks like it's voyeuristic. I'm looking through a wall, and in the background is a guy, half dressed, holding a cup of coffee, and a young woman in a bathing suit, like a two-piece bathing suit, kind of dancing in front of him. And you see it through ivy and all this stuff. Right. So it's a voyeuristic kind of thing. Right. That peeping Tom thing you mentioned.
Because you're come from a conservative background, but you're a one weird dude.
Right. And so, so I took this photo oil, and I thought, I'm going to try I'm going to make everything. I was going to make everything kind of pink, say. So I kind of rubbed this pink oil on there, and I'm like, hey, okay, that's kind of cool. So then I thought, well, I'll try green, which was like most of the scene was green. And it just, it made it like a warm summer night and gave it this atmosphere that was just really wonderful.
So that was the green and the pink blending together?
No, these are separate? Green.
Okay, all right, just green. Got it.
Yeah, the pink got torn up and thrown away.
Okay.
The green stayed. So then I just determined, each piece I determined a color that would emotionally set off that piece. And that's when I went back to color for a little bit, and then the next series was about theater, and it all had blue paint, and then that was the last. That's when I stopped making still photographs for a while, until 2002.
Okay. At some point, you start making small sets to photograph into.
Yes.
It's almost like, I wouldn't call them a maquette, but they're
miniatures.
some miniatures. And is that at the point that you're doing the golden ratio exploration, or is that, or was it
in? Okay, so in 2001, I was in. I guess when was Dave Hickey he did one of the Site Santa Fe biennials, and then after that, Louis Grouchos, who was the director at the time, asked me to do a solo show at Site Santa Fe. And I said, okay, that's great. I think I'm ready to do another series of photographs for you. And so I wanted to. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just thought I would think about it. So I know this is going to sound crazy, but one morning, I don't know if I was half asleep or completely asleep or dreaming or what, but I had a slideshow in my whatever, mind's eye, whatever. And I woke up and I wrote all 7 of what I saw down. And I just left. I kept them. I didn't think about it or anything. And so I had a new assistant, and we were doing something that wasn't photographed. Working on a film or a script or something, just, again, I didn't really have much for an assistant to do because it was just to have someone if I did portrait commissions. And she said, when are we going to make photographs? I said, well, all right, I have these ideas, and this is what we're going to do. Well, the thing is, because they came from this dream state, they could not be made in real time or in real life or in full size.
Got it.
There was, people flying. There were people sitting up in trees. They were very theatrical.